Hey, everybody, welcome. It's Tim Shurr, and today I'm interviewing my friend Michael Bledsoe. He's a transformational architect who helps people achieve profound self awareness and alignment using his Retcon approach. He studied cognitive science at Johns Hopkins and blends neuroscience, psychology, sociology, spirituality to provide lasting results for clients. He's the president of Retcon and creator of Code, an advanced human analysis technology. Michael's a super smart dude and he thinks high level. And we really have great conversations. And I'm like, we should have one of our conversations where everybody could listen if they were interested in learning about how to cultivate their best selves, how to clarify what their vision for themselves is. You know, who do you want to be? What's you 2.0 look like? So many people struggle with identifying what their purpose and vision is. And so Michael and I are going to have a conversation about it. And if you have any questions, then go ahead and put it in the comments. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for such a glowing intro, Tim. If it wasn't coming out of your very authentic mouth, I'd be doubting it myself. But thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So let's get into this then. So many people feel lost when they're trying to find their purpose. So do you think that purpose is something that we discover, or is it something that we create?
So I hope to not lose anyone in the process of this answer, but we have to get a little esoteric for a moment. So what most people are trapped in is the process of seeking themselves. They're actually trying to find themselves, and seeking your purpose is one way of trying to do that, because your purpose is a manifestation of your authentic self. So if you're trying to find a purpose, oftentimes that's an excuse to not try to find yourself, or to actually not sit still and recognize that you've always been who and where you are. You just needed to stop looking, because you're always, you find yourself the last place you ever look, which is just wherever you decide to stop looking. And how this tends to play out is that people get it confused that, okay, like you asked, is purpose something that you find? Is it something you create? How does that work? Mm-hmm. Well, the nature of who each of us individually is, the exact characteristics, we should really call them the divine characteristics that each of us in our full authentic being is crafted from, defines the parameters of what that purpose is going to look like. And all purpose is going to be some sort of service, because all purpose has to transcend self-service. That's survival. When you're just serving yourself, that entire category of theoretical purpose is trying to perpetuate survival. Now, it could be the survival of your flesh. It could be the survival of your false idea of who you would like to think you are and who you'd like other people to believe you are, but it's survival nonetheless. So the moment we drop that and we say, okay, what is it in my heart? What is it within my being that calls me to serve, and how? What is it that I look out into the world and witness and I say, wow, I really feel like I could do something about that? Now, where people get a little bit led astray, we could say, or lead themselves astray, is that they want to go down the path of pursuing a purpose and changing the world before they really work on changing themselves and becoming themselves. And there's a really good old Buddhist saying that goes something to the effect of, when I was a young man, I set out to change the world. And after many years of difficulty in trying, I found that I could not change my world. So I set out to change my nation. And after a struggle with that as well, I found that I could not change my nation. And so I resolved myself to change my state. And upon finding out that I could not change my state, I resigned myself to trying to change my community. And even that I found I could not change. And finally, after even trying to change my family, I resigned myself to trying to change myself. And what I realized upon changing myself was that had I simply started with changing myself, I could have thereby changed my family, changed my community, changed my nation, and changed my world.
Very good.
And people who are not coming from that level of self-awareness create messes that it may sound a little bit arrogant, but some of the rest of us have to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why we have this perennial wisdom, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Hinduism, whether it's Christianity, is near and dear to both of our hearts. I'm a student of many paradigms because I have to be able to help people through multiple paradigms. And sometimes external analogies make certain things within our, let's say, default Christian paradigm more clear, because it's a very similar message.
Yes. So let me jump in and review real quick, because you already dropped so many golden nuggets, right? So first, if I heard you correctly, if you want to figure out what your vision is, what you're really trying to do is figure out who your authentic self is, right? What is it about you that calls you to serve, right? And that all purpose is really about service, right? There's two levels. We're self-sorted, and then we become others sorted. We're self-focused or selfish, and we're focused on surviving and being okay. And then the next level is where you feel safe, where you feel secure, where you know you're going to be okay. And a lot of times faith is what gets us there. Faith and upgrading our limiting beliefs from the past. And so then we can shift from survival to service and real fulfillment. Tony Robbins always says the secret to living is giving, right? And it's about creating win-win situations where you know that you're going to be okay, so you can focus on helping other people. When you wake up in the morning, your first thought is, thank you, God, for giving me this day where I can create and have this experience. And then the second thought is, how can I take care of my spouse today? How can I take care of my kids today? How can I take care of my customers today? How can I take care of my employees today? Right. And so it becomes all about serving. And I think that's really awesome. So if you want to start to understand who you are authentically and how you want to show up in the world and what that vision's like, you start by thinking about, what calls you, what you feel you could offer, and then what do you need to do inside of you to be able to do that, right? Like if you're afraid, then you've got to build confidence. If you are unclear, you've got to create clarity, right? And usually we need help for that. And we've got AI tools, we've got your code system that you've developed, we've got just these conversations, right? In fact, light bulbs are probably going off inside of people who are watching and listening to this right now, just because of the conversation that we're having. Does that kind of summarize it?
No. It said that it lost connection to my mic for a second.
Oh, sorry. You're back. I can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. A big part of the cheat code that Christ was preaching is that when you're completely focused on the well-being of others, it sends an unbelievable signal to yourself that you're good. You're good. You're completely solid. You've got everything taken care of that you need. And, what people don't oftentimes do, especially in a nation where 50% plus of people have a negative net worth, well, you're not good. You spend money on things that you don't need. You can't even actually have if your cup is actually running negative, then you don't have anything to pour on anyone else. Now, a mortgage, for example, doesn't really count in that for various reasons. It's just how that has to work. But this is the problem. People want to fix other people. They want to pour into other people. They want to serve other people in the way they actually believe will be fulfilling for themselves, but they're still pouring from a cup that empties. I don't have a problem sitting through hearing the most horrible things my clients tell me, because my cup just doesn't empty and I don't need them to fill it. So I have a responsibility to assist them, to bring them closer to themselves, but I don't have a responsibility for them. I have a responsibility to them. And this is another thing that people really get caught up in that limits their ability to come into contact with themselves.
So what do you mean? What's the difference there? You don't have a responsibility for them, but you have a responsibility to them. What's the difference?
Well, that's probably one of the most significant distinctions that keeps people from accessing purpose and fulfillment. My responsibility is only for myself, which is to say I can only be truly responsible for someone I have total power over. And that's only me. Now I have massive influence over others, and you have influence proportional to the impeccability of your character, your integrity, and your word, which are all aligned in that sense, because people will rely on you if you have an impeccable word, which is a reflection of impeccable character and integrity. But I only at most can be responsible to them, because I can't make their decisions. I'm not standing here to violate their free will, just as God isn't going to violate anyone's free will. I'm here to guide people. I look at what I do as liberation. I liberate people from the ideas that no longer serve them, the patterns of behavior that no longer serve them, the obstructions that they have constructed that they actually can't see a way out of or around. And that liberation is how you come into contact with the authentic character that naturally acts out an intrinsically fulfilling purpose, where it starts to feel more and more effortless. I have an unfortunate analogy, and I said this to a client at one point, and I was like, dang, that's actually a really good analogy. It's just really unfortunate. I said, why is it that human prisoners escape the prisons we build for them? Well, it's because we built, or the prisoner was made first, and then we built the prison. So unless you're going to design the prison with the same level of intelligence that the person was designed with, they're going to find a way out. Now, what about the mind prison we have for ourselves, and the prisoner we we make ourselves into in our own mind? Different story. We design the prison first, and then we design the perfect prisoner, one who cannot escape. And this is where a lack of humility to ask for external assistance prevents people from actually coming into contact with themselves and escaping that mind prison, because you designed the prison to be inescapable to the version of you that you think sits inside of it. And this is a repeated theme throughout all religions and spiritual traditions. Like, if you're going to get enlightened in the East, you need a Rishi, Roshi, you need a guru, because you're not going to figure out the path yourself. You're the actual thing that you have to break the pattern of being. So you're not going to figure it out. In the Christian tradition, we say, all right, we'll just have faith that if you actually follow the path of Christ and you love others with a radical commitment to selflessness, which, mind you, people misunderstand selflessness. Selflessness is not self-sacrifice. Selflessness is the commitment to others in their own best interest that doesn't violate your best interest. If it violates your best interest, it's self-betrayal.
Right. It ultimately ends up serving you better. Right. We hang on to these paradigms, these beliefs, which are the prison bars in our mental prison. These belief in life experiences and all this evidence that we collect in our head for why we believe these bars are real and they exist, and why we're trapped, even though we have the keys in our pocket, but we don't know how to access those keys. And so that's one of the amazing things about when you're following Christ and you're following what the advice in the Bible in the New Testament. We always think about how you have to sacrifice and how it's about giving yourself up and giving your dreams up and all that stuff, or being poor. Like, being poor is holy, and that's not what the Bible's saying at all. So what we have to do is recognize that these limiting beliefs, when we get rid of them and we actually do what we're told, God makes us suffer so that it increases obedience. That's what I read in the Bible. Our suffering is used to increase obedience. And when we're obedient, our life improves. So it's like when the father's trying to get the son to behave, the father's doing it because he knows it's in the best interest of the son, right? And then when the son obeys, it's nice for the father, but it's more for the son, right? And so we're the sons and daughters in this experience. And so you're right. You can't see the label when you're in the bottle. It's very difficult to catch your own blind spots. and we need each other. It's not a sign of weakness. I have a friend that was a retired Navy SEAL and a medic on the team, and he said asking for clarity and asking for clarification was a sign of wisdom. It kept you from getting shot. And so, most people think that asking questions and asking for help is weak, but the toughest men in the world, realize that it's actually smart and a good idea to ask for help when you need it.
Oh, absolutely. Knowing where you're weak is strength. That's sort of the ironic, reconciliation of what might appear to be a paradox. If you want to be strong in every place, all right, then you're going to be alone, because you're actually not going to make enough room for other people to carry you in places where you just don't have it figured out. Why would you want that? The world that we live in doesn't even, it's unbelievably hostile to that because of how complex it is. So the complexity actually requires a return to a sort of tribalism, which I experience within my organization, where there are things I just don't know, at least nearly as well as other people. And then I get the opportunity to have an empty cup, as they say in Buddhism, and I get to be a student again. And I get to learn from people and watch mastery unfold in domains I know much less about. That's a wonderful experience. The person who is so attached to their pride in who they think they are that they can't let other people in has completely lost touch with their humanity, because they're at war with their humanity. That's just being at war with yourself. And you literally can't live from purpose at that point, to tie that back in, because the only purpose you're executing is working as hard as you possibly can to find out how much you need other people and you need other things beyond yourself. And everybody needs God. Everybody needs a connection to the divine, because that connection to the divine is identical to standing in your authentic self. You can't stand in your authentic self without already having a connection to the divine. So if your pride cuts you off from that, the possibility of living out a genuine purpose is non-existent. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to serve a purpose, because in my experience, reality makes use of everything within it, but you're going to serve purposes of a lesson of how not to be. You might serve the purpose of ending a bloodline of your own that you've poisoned so radically that your children just don't want to reproduce. You might serve multiple purposes. They're just not going to be pleasant purposes to you, but they will be a net benefit to everyone else, because that's the only way this works. And that's a hard thing for people to see, but that's also what faith is for. Faith is how you make that quantum leap into a point of view you don't know how to logically reason toward. So if you just assume that everything is actually good and everything serves an ultimate good, then you can leap into that point of view on faith, and you can start to see that. And you can also say, all right, well, I just have faith that if I can't see it yet, whatever I need to see will be revealed to me as I need to see it, because people don't need to see everything. But to tie this back into purpose and character, it's this type of faith that actually allows you to stand within your own authenticity, because from the authentic point of view, it starts to become more and more apparent that everything is actually for your benefit, just like you're talking about, all the suffering you're going through. Well, God can speak a language of pleasant love or unpleasant love. It just depends on how you want your ears to work and your eyes to work.
Well, and what you need. Because again, if we take it back to a parent, right? Sometimes I'm going to be super loving and supportive of my son. And sometimes I'm going to be on his butt and very stern based on what he needs in that moment. Right. And so in the Bible, it's very clear that God is setting boundaries for you. He's drawing a line in the sand, right? But he's done that because he loves you. He's made these sacrifices for you. And sometimes, people are like, well, I don't need an invisible God to save me. I can be a good person on my own. But that's coming from our ego. That's coming from our selfish nature that wants to believe that if we need something outside of us, it means that we're not good enough.
Yeah,
And
and
we don't want
Christ
to feel
himself
like we're
said,
not
no
good
man is
enough.
good but God. So you can only live up to your profane standard of good. You can't live up to the standard of good.
Mm-hmm.
What you decide, I don't need a God to tell me what my standard of good should be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the actual expulsion from the garden in Genesis, if we examine that psychologically, is about Adam and Eve replacing the divine standard of good with their own standard of good.
Mm-hmm.
They had their own standard of good and evil that they replaced the divine standard of good and evil with.
Mm-hmm.
And theirs was
Yeah.
a dualistic standard of good or evil, which is a really stupid standard.
Mm-hmm.
And if you play by that standard, you're going to actually see a world that's hostile to you, because reality itself is hostile to a false standard of good and evil. And you're going to suffer.
Or you'll show up hostile, but you won't see it in yourself.
Right.
You'll show up with that righteous indignation, that aloofness, that arrogance, that, every day people are calling it.
Stance.
Yeah. Right now, everybody's a narcissist, right? Because we got
Yeah.
some new words, narcissist, gaslighting. So now everybody's using this. Everybody has anxiety. My 5-year-old is suicidal. Our language is changed significantly in this current moment in time. And so we won't recognize that in ourselves. So we need a higher standard that's been around. And those that don't want to follow it, it's not just the consequences that you're going to suffer, but it's the consequences of those around you that you are ignoring because you're caught up in your own world that is causing problems. Usually their old joke in psychology is the people that need this the most aren't in the room.
Right.
Right. So now in business, let me keep going with this. So in business, there's a lot of emphasis on adding the right strategies, tools, and habits, but you suggest that removing the wrong things could be more important. So can you give me an example of what a wrong thing might be that holds back entrepreneurs?
Sure. So let's say you're stuck in a trading time for money on a one-to-one basis. Well, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to acquire whatever reserve of capital or just work extra hard during your off hours to make a transition to a one-to-many type of model, whether that's video courses, group sessions, training, whatever it is. So there's a removal before there's the addition. You have to look at what is keeping you stuck, because what's keeping you stuck is being paradigm locked into a certain pattern. And you're going to have to remove your confinement to that pattern. You're going to actually have to remove your beliefs that have disinclined you to explore possibilities beyond what you've been currently pursuing. And I know you talk a lot about beliefs. So if you don't actually remove the beliefs, you don't change the behavior, because behavior conforms to beliefs. So now you can strong arm yourself behaviorally with a lot of conscious will and effort, but eventually all you're doing is stretching a rubber band that's going to just snap back at some point or another. And then you're going to just get down on yourself and feel ashamed and guilty and things like that. It's not going to work. So personal transformation precedes professional transformation every time that it's actually sustainable. That's the caveat. Sure, you can make it happen, but Steve Jobs got fired from his own company and had to come back a bit of a different person. So or you can play this game where you just crash your identity to get to every new milestone financially, or maybe you just try to figure out who you really are and then organically evolve simultaneous to your business organically evolving. So and that, removing the wrong people, removing the wrong patterns of interfacing with people, removing whatever advice you're actually receiving that's most likely reinforcing where you are, or just stopping and taking advice and executing, because whatever time it takes to receive advice is time you could oftentimes spend executing, because nothing changes without execution.
So that's where
So
people get lost when they're on YouTube
yeah,
videos and they're trying to get all this revelation from TikTok, right? And they're just
yeah,
going down these rabbit holes that are wasting time and giving them sometimes a lot of ideas that are bad ideas. And so as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about, I work with a lot of very high performing people, and they already got a great attitude. They're already motivated. They're already driven. They've already made hundreds of millions of dollars with their company. So they don't need me to come in and talk about positive thinking. They're like a Ferrari, but they got the parking
sure,
brake on and they don't know how to get the parking brake off. And so the parking brake are some limiting beliefs or some blind spots that they're not aware of, or they're aware of it, but they don't know how to change it. Or maybe it's a bad habit, like they keep going to drugs or alcohol, and then it's slowing
hmm,
down their performance. Or they're afraid of letting people down, so they become too controlling. Or they're not delegating, and so they keep bottlenecking their team's growth. And so these are common problems. Or they just don't trust. You know, I work with a guy with a big company, $1 billion company, but he didn't trust his people, right?
oh,
And I just
right,
kept thinking it could be a $10 billion company if you would just get over your trust issues, right? And so,
yeah,
you know, when you have that, just because you're successful, it doesn't mean you're more evolved, right? Or you're more emotionally mature. It just means
yeah,
that maybe you were in the right place at the right time, or you are doing a bunch of things right, but it's like you got a computer and the computer's powerful, but you got malware, right? You got you got a virus in
yeah.
there, and now it won't allow the program to work no matter how good it is. So what we have to do is we've got to remove those mind viruses, and then the program will take off on its own.
Absolutely. And that's why we have our SDES, our self-deception elimination system too, which uses a bit of a hypnotic approach, and it's procedural. But it's also facilitated where it's just self-reflection, just in a way that most people would like to run from. And, you know, to riff off of what you're saying there about generally, you know, accomplished people, there are very few of them that I'm impressed by. And that's because most of them just have a more glitzy self-escape strategy than most people. And oftentimes that's just a function of what your initial conditions combined with your genetic predispositions inclined you toward.
Mm-hmm.
So people take a lot more credit for that than they actually oftentimes potentially should, when it's like, okay, well, the actual decisions that you start making when they're your decisions, or the decision to stop running from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the decisions that impress me. The decisions to say, all right, well, how many mirrors can I find to reflect back to me who I actually am?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care if a person has no money in their bank account, or if they have, you know, more money than God in their bank account. If they're willing to do that, then I have a beyond default level of respect for them. If they're not willing to do that, you're just part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Because you're part of the entire network of people who believe in the idea of problems in the first place. Mm-hmm. Because you're someone who has a problem with yourself, so you have to have a problem with reality. Mm-hmm. Because yourself is the very lens through which you experience reality. So you're going to have to identify problems. Yeah. And you know, that's where a lot of those people work really hard in one area, mm-hmm. to avoid recognizing how much they suck in other dimensions of their life.
Like their relationships.
Yeah,
like
their mental health wealth,
or their marriage,
relationship wealth, their spiritual wealth isn't, you know, there. And this is where we get to the line in the Bible that it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Well, now, to be fair, a needle is an entrance to a city. It's not an actual sewing needle, different term. Mm-hmm. But the idea is that when you are attached to the trappings of worldly success, and you are attached to an idea of yourself that is defined by what you've accomplished in the material domain, the chances that you're going to actually have the humility to genuinely pursue yourself in a spiritual sense, to genuinely look inwardly, to genuinely stand in a position of humility and say, I don't know anything at all. That's my favorite statement. I've accomplished a lot, but I like to say, I don't know anything at all, especially because when I'm dealing with someone who really thinks they're smart, it's usually obvious who's a little bit smarter. I don't have the need to prove that to anyone. But if I can say I don't know anything at all, then it starts to make them uncomfortable in a productive way. Because if I don't know anything at all and I'm saying all these things, then how much do you really know? And sometimes some clients actually have to have that. It's a playful game. It's not hostile. But a lot of people really come in like they know things, or like it's an accomplishment to be right. That's one of my favorite ones. Like it's an accomplishment to be right. We don't even think that one through. You're never wrong. It doesn't even work that way technically. Everything you actually were wrong about, you've recorrected and categorized as I was wrong about that. So you're right about having been wrong about it. Everything that is going to turn out that you're wrong about, which is basically everything, you're currently categorizing within the category of things I'm right about. And you're right because reality hasn't shown you you're wrong yet. So that's one of my favorite sticking points for people who really are prideful. They like to think they're right about things. You're not right about anything. Because right is relative to whatever standard you're applying. And my standard is absolutely right. So if you don't have the standard of absolutely right, you have a standard that is imperfect, which is a wrong standard of right on purpose to make yourself feel better. And this is another one of those traps that keeps people away from themselves because they refuse to stand in that unknowing. They refuse to be in that humility of, well, perhaps I'm wrong about everything. Maybe I do need a Lord to turn to. Maybe I do need a savior. Maybe I do need guides. Maybe I do need friends because maybe we're kind of wrong about everything. And who knows what could happen.
Well, it certainly opens you up, right? It certainly opens you up. If you can't do that, then you got to check your ego, right?
Yeah, you do.
I mean, that's where it's at. And problems are really just doors of opportunity. And so if you have a hard time, humbling yourself, then that should be the red flag. That should let you know. And if your friends are telling you that, or your wife, or your third ex-wife, and the kids, are telling you that, then that's a red flag. And the arrogant ones are the ones that are like, I don't care. Right?
Yeah.
Well, then you deserve the suffering that you get, right? But the other people don't deserve the suffering that you're giving. Yeah. Others don't deserve the suffering that you're giving. And so, all right, well, we got to wrap this up here. So let's do a quick summary. Do you have 1, 2, 3 tips for what people can do to start to discover their authentic self, to clarify this vision for themselves? It's in here, but I think we need to just summarize it.
Sure. Let me see. I'll do the general advice and then a little bit of a shameless plug, because if I thought it was an easy thing, I wouldn't have built the technologies and processes that we have. So
for sure.
So you have to do shadow work. You have to look into Carl Jung. It's not an option. You cannot find yourself until you find all the parts of yourself that you've rejected. You cannot become yourself until you've reintegrated all the parts of you that you scattered about throughout your mind and denied being you. The liar, the angry fool, the arrogant, know-it-all, whatever it is, all of it. And, there's good shadow work journals out there. There's tremendous amounts of YouTube advice on it. Dig into personality psychology, Big 5 aspect scale, Jordan Peterson, if you don't want to use my technology. Something like that to know where you stand in terms of how your personality shows up with regard to other people. Because maybe you're really disagreeable and maybe you come off as really brash, and maybe you need to refine the amount of grace you filter your confidence through to meet people where they are so that they can receive whatever message you have. Perhaps many things. but you can't know until you know where you are. And if you want the most extensive option available, then, code and DNS, as far as I can tell, until someone shows me something better, are the best options on the market, because 582 questions of getting to know yourself intimately and quantitatively is no joke. And it's an accomplishment when you sit down and you knock out 2 hours of introspection that's thoroughly guided. It's also how we find out whether or not our clients are serious, because an unserious client, you got to drag them, to get it done, and they usually just won't get it done. So, and then DNS is just systematized shadow work, where instead of, here's the analogy. You can take a vacuum and you can hit all the dirty spots on the floor that you see, or you can go systematically, line by line, move all the furniture, dust behind the TV, and you use a complete procedure to make sure that you clean things as thoroughly as possible. Well, this is why we use a semi-structured system. But just do something.
Yeah.
You don't have to go full bore into this most aggressive solutions, but just do something.
Well, I think that it's a great idea to be able to do that. I mean, what an experience to be able to take a deep dive into yourself and spend a couple of hours. We spent a couple of hours watching a movie on Netflix. Like, can you spend a couple of hours diving deeper into yourself in a way that could transform the rest of your life, the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of your life? I think that that's worthy of an investment, right? So we'll put the links for that. And of course, if you need a quick fix, something that's going to just take the break off, then our One Belief Away hypnosis method will help you with that as well. So I think that using both, right, is
for sure,
because there's no one thing that's going to do everything for you. You can't just have a toolbox with a screwdriver in it. You need all the tools to be able to get the jobs done. So, Michael, thank you so much for being a part of this today. I really enjoyed your profound insights, and thank you for sharing this with everyone.
Well, it's a great pleasure, Tim. I hope to do this again, and hopefully next time I'll have my webcam figured out so I don't seem like I'm doing the robot inadvertently the whole time.
That's right. All right, everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching this. I appreciate you. Put any comments or questions that you have in the box. And then remember, you're just one belief away from having a huge breakthrough in your life. So do the shadow work like Michael says, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.